Hi everyone, I'm Krista Nonamaker with I Like History. I'm so glad that you've chosen to look at this project and this PowerPoint presentation and consider it for your students or for yourself and learning more about the Japanese American experience during World War II. The terminology that I use throughout the slides is mostly Japanese American, but I did want to say that during that period of time, during World War II, many of the Japanese Americans called themselves Nikkei, and sometimes they also called themselves Issei, Nisei, and Kibei, depending on what they were referring to. So those are terms that you definitely will want to know. Issei were the Japanese immigrants who were not able to become naturalized American citizens. Nisei were their American-born children with American citizenship. And Kibei were Nisei children who were often sent back to Japan for a period of schooling and then returned to the United States. So these slides start with a little bit of explanation about what happened or their experience essentially in the United States prior to World War II and their typical occupations, the restrictions that they faced in terms of immigration and naturalization, and then of course the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1942, which was followed immediately by a debate about their loyalty. And within 2 months, the executive order to evacuate the Japanese Americans to internment camps was made through Executive Order 9066, signed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And you see in these pictures the fear and the general movement. There had never been such a mass movement of people prior to this, and it was really astounding if you think about it. Here are more pictures of that situation. They were compliant and obedient, and they were trying to make the best of it, but it was certainly not constitutional. The evacuation process was quick, swift, and very difficult. Notices were put up, and they were sent first to assembly centers, which are not on this map, and then to War Relocation Authority camps, WRA camps, throughout the West. The area here shows where they were evacuated from, which is where the majority of the Japanese Americans lived. About actually a little more than 50% lived on the West Coast, and then the remainder lived in Hawaii, and with some in the Midwest and East Coast. So first they went to the assembly centers, and then they were sent to the actual internment camps. And these are pictures of and descriptions of what happened in those places. There was the infamous loyalty questionnaire as well. And depending on the answers to numbers 27 and 28, some people were actually sent to segregation centers at Tule Lake. And the disloyal Japanese Americans did face a lot of difficulty, unfortunately. They were well within their rights to, of course, resist, but that did not change anything for their experience. There were some who were able to leave the camps if they were able to go to college or find work in the Midwest or on the East Coast. And the resettlement was not always easy, but it was assisted by many different groups throughout the country. This is a discussion of some of the legal challenges of the to internment by some. It's amazing, isn't it, that despite all of the internment and the issues surrounding that some Japanese Americans were willing to sacrifice time and their lives in some situations by joining the military. The military intelligence, in fact, is something that I think you might find surprising but fascinating. Many Japanese Americans were recruited and enlisted in military intelligence school and training and worked in the Pacific Theater to help with translation and interrogation services. Women also served as nurses, as WACs, in segregated units, of course. And by war's end, then re-entry into civilian life was going to be very important. They were faced with discrimination just as they had been prior to the war. But again, they tried to reestablish themselves in their jobs and in their residences and start afresh. It was often very difficult for some of them, especially the older generation. So an interesting story, and these are letters showing that. There was some resolution to the legal challenges much later in the 1980s. So you'll read about that. And then the sources, it's actually fascinating to look through all these sources. I encourage you to consider them for further exploration. Berkeley Library Digital Assets, the Library of Congress, the National Archives all provide amazing sources, and here are some more websites for that. Okay, thank you again. I look forward to seeing you at another time. I hope you go to Teachers Pay Teachers and take a look at some of my products, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.